What's up, folks? Today I wanted to talk to you about a post that's gone somewhat viral. It's from Riot Phroxzon. He's talking about loser's queue. So first, I just want to dive into this post, but then I also want to explore something that we've seen as we've been doing our leaderboard and our custom development work over on twitch.tv/Lord Kuze. We've been using the API over there for some time to basically build a custom system for our channel that allows people to wager on our games. We then have like a leaderboard thing, which I'll just show right now. This is running locally, but yeah, you can see the names of a bunch of different people who are over on the stream wagering on our games live. Top 5 each month win a like mystery skin prize. And so this is something I've been working on for a while, about a year or two. And essentially what it has taught me is a lot about some of the inner workings of at least the APIs over on Riot's side of things. This will be relevant in a second, but needless to say, spent a lot of time looking at the type of data they have available and the type of data that services that you probably use like OPGG or League of Graphs also use to power their systems. It's all fair use, all above board, nothing nefarious there. But some of what we've seen sort of flies in the face, or at least seems to fly in the face of some of the things that are said in the post here. And so I want to explore those, sort of put them out there in the open and see what you guys think. So first things first, let's take a look at this post. So Riot Phroxzon says, loser's queue doesn't exist. We're not intentionally putting bad players on your team to make you lose more. Even if we assume that premise, when we want to give you good players so you stop losing, potentially. For ranked, we match you on your rating and that's all. If you've won a lot and start losing, it's because you're playing against better players and aren't at that level anymore. It's not because we matched you with inters and put all the smurfs on the enemy team. I mean, that would be ridiculous. For 99.9% of people reading this, even if you think you're playing perfectly and post a good KDA screenshot with the rest of your team inting, I promise you that if a good player reviews your games, there's hundreds of things you could have done differently that can change the trajectory of the game. I don't think anyone's debating this, but it doesn't necessarily disprove the idea of whether or not there's a loser's queue. Sure, there are games where your teammates play poorly. That's just the nature of a 5v5 game. In the long run, you're the only common factor, and the only one responsible for your rating is you. If you took an unwinnable game and replayed it with any challenger in your spot, it would probably result in a win. A good non-giving up attitude, see the top post on the front page of Reddit right now. A growth mindset, investing in a good coach, asking for reputable people for advice will help make your relationship with League of Legends a lot better. There are 5 potential giver-uppers on the enemy team and only 4 on yours. Don't make it 5. I mainly wanted to make this post because in the process of helping people debug their accounts, there's so many people who legitimately believe we're putting them in loser's queue that it's driving me crazy. Some observations from coaching over the last 12 years. Most players play too conservatively with a lead. Playing on the edge to drop pressure and waste the jungler's time while not throwing is extremely impactful. Playing for KDA so you can post a screenshot of doing well while your team feeds so you feel better is not going to help you get better. Review every death. 95% of deaths are avoidable until you hit very high ranks. Find the root cause of what you're dying, managing, waving correctly, etc. Play to win your condition while identifying and disrupting theirs. It's interesting because for me, these are two separate things. I mean, on the one hand, it's a Riot employee saying there's no loser's queue. I'm just going to come out and say right at the beginning that I don't believe that there is a loser's queue. I just want an answer on something, and I'll show you in just a second what that is. The rest of this post is all really good advice, in my opinion, on how to get better. I really want to make it clear that with this video, I'm not saying that, well, loser's queue exists, therefore you're just screwed, right? Therefore, you shouldn't do all these things that he's mentioning. You shouldn't review your replays. You shouldn't care because you're in loser's queue and it's just doomed. So it is what it is. I'm not saying that. I'm also not saying or agreeing with people who think that loser's queue is this account-wide applicable thing that they can't ever get out of, and so it's just doomed, and why even bother playing? So let me show you what I'm looking at and what gives me pause from a technical perspective, because on the Reddit thread currently, if we go and look at this, a lot of these are just jokes and they're actually pretty good. Even if it did exist, no way in hell Riot or any game company for that matter would ever confirm it unless public had incontrovertible proof. What you don't see is you don't see anyone posting any sort of proof that this occurs. And I think a lot of the refrain that you see actually is about MMR. The real loser's queue is just where your MMR surpasses the average up for your rank and you get put in harder games. Obviously, the algorithm isn't going to intentionally try to make you lose. They definitely had skill check games when I played too, where if you won a lot of games in a row, it would randomly stick you in a much harder game, but usually just one. Always figured it was for MMR calibration. I think I've experienced that. I think that's fair. And I don't think that's untrue, right? Everything that Phroxzon has said is fair. I just need an answer on something. This is the Riot Games endpoint for entries by summoner. And essentially the way that this works is you get something called a PUID, or just an ID, in this case, I guess. I'm not really sure actually what the payload is to get the specific response. You can look it up in Riot's documentation. It's right there. So in this example, I am querying Pobelter. And so I'm going to get a bunch of information back about him in terms of how he's doing, both in, you can see the first one here, the first object here is the flex, and the second one is rank solo, 5v5. You can see summoner ID, league ID, the tier, the rank, right? So he's diamond 4 in ranked flex, he's challenger rank 1 in 5v5. There are 3 or 4 other things that come in this response as key value pairs that I think, if you've been looking at this for a second, you can already see. We're looking at the second object. I don't really give a shit about ranked flex. I don't think most people do. You have wins and you have losses. Total sense, right? But we do have 4 key value pairs at the end of this, which are weird. First off, you have veteran, and it's a Boolean value, which means it has to be true or false. It's not like numeric or string value. There's no words or anything. True or false, right? PokeBelcher's been around a long time. It's not that surprising that the Boolean value here is true for veteran. Is the account inactive? False, obviously. He's played a game in a certain amount of period, so it's false. He's an active account. Fresh blood. Is it true or false? It's false. Obviously, this is not a new account. Not that surprising. And then finally, and in my opinion, most interestingly, you have hot streak. True or false? What I'm wondering is why. There's like a reasonable explanation, and then there's sort of like the conspiracy tinfoil hat explanation. And let's go through both. I mean, I don't really know either way, and that's sort of why I'm bringing it up. One interesting thing I was able to find looking back at what these values might be is a thread from Reddit way back 11, 12, 13 years ago talking about a bug with the hot streak icon. It's very possible that this service is simply something that is a holdover from an extremely old version of the League of Legends client. The metal thing there was for veteran, and what it showed was somebody who had been in the same division for a long time. Hot streak showed a certain amount of games that they were winning. I think Fresh Blood, probably the same thing. So you had all of these icons in the old version, old client of League of Legends. Now, at the time, there was a lot of discussions around what this means, how does it impact MMR, etc. And this is back at a time where you have to remember it was like very, very nebulous as to what was going on. Early days of MMR systems, understanding of MMR systems, people were sort of all over the place with it. It is possible that this is just sort of like a stayover of something that League was using internally to basically show icons in their own system based on these self-defined attributes. And the question then sort of changes a little bit, which is sort of like, okay, these things were there, they were used at one point. Is it a case where you're just giving us an old API for use that satisfies the needs of most third-party creators, and it's just a case where no one is working on it anymore, which would be right in Riot's wheelhouse, right? Of like having a system that's not really maintained. APIs historically, particularly public-facing ones, aren't top of Riot's list of things they want to take care of because there's really not a huge value outside of like other services bringing new people to League of Legends because of the tools they build around League of Legends data. Is this just a holdover from this? It's just irrelevant now, and it was only really for front-end usage in the client to show these icons when they were relevant, and that's it? Or is it a case where those things are still actively in the API and are still considered during matchmaking, during whatever else? It could easily go either way. Both are very fair explanations. Maybe it's just a case where Riot has moved on from that sort of thinking. It caused too much confusion. You can look back at some of these posts from 2013. You have people, what is the actual medal? Maybe you're getting a promotion. What is it? Hot streak. What does it mean? And there's confusion even at the time where I'm like, what the hell is this? What does it mean? People get freaked out similarly to how they're getting freaked out 10 years, 11 years later around how matchmaking working, whether or not losers queue is a thing. It's kind of funny to look back on it and see that not a lot has changed in terms of how people look at this sort of stuff and still get freaked out. It's a fair question. Is this just something that is just in there because it's just a pain in the ass to take it out? Or is there actual implication for having this in the API? Does it actually still matter internally to League of Legends systems in some way? Who knows? Personally, I think it's probably the former. It seems like the kind of thing where there's just not a lot of bandwidth to deal with an API that is not really being maintained for Riot internal use anymore, but still serves the needs of most of the public. It's still interesting to look at and think about. Let's get into the conspiracy shit though, because if the data here is used for matchmaking, and I'm not saying it is, but if let's just operate on the assumption for a second that it is. 3 of those 4 key value pairs become slightly more problematic. Whether or not somebody's a veteran, whether or not somebody's new, which I am assuming is what fresh blood means, and I think it actually is in the documentation. We can take a look in a second. And whether or not somebody's on a hot streak, all 3 of those are things, based on this endpoint, that it would seem to suggest matchmaking is using to put games together. So, from there you can make the conspiratorial jump relatively easily. If I'm on a hot streak, I'm being put with other players who are on a hot streak versus players who are not on a hot streak. Similar as a veteran. Maybe I know that a veteran player, they've been playing a long time, they are less likely to quit given poor matchmaking circumstances because they've been around a long time. Is this how it works? Do I have any actual evidence that this is true? No, because, and I really want to stress this, an API given to me or to OPGG, Legal Graphs, any third-party creator really, the data in there is completely different from matchmaking data. There is no matchmaking endpoint that says, here's how we're looking at you as we are thinking about MMR and how as we're putting the game together. Surely there is an internal endpoint that you put Kuze into, and it rummages me around and it finds me 9 players, 4 on my team, 5 against, and it makes the match, right? I mean, that's how matchmaking is going to work at some level. What is interesting about that and what is being suggested in the post is the only thing we're looking at is MMR. That's it. Everybody in the same game has relatively the same MMR, and the team average comes out to about the same. So that very well may be true. But when I first saw this has been here for a long time. We first started playing around with this endpoint during COVID, I guess, so at least 2-3 years. Veteran and active Fresh Blood and Hot Streak have been here that entire time. It just seems like a good moment to bring this up. I haven't seen a lot of people talk about this, and probably it's because most people aren't actually in the code and they don't really have anything to point to, and I don't necessarily want to stir the pot here. I just would like to know what the point of this is. This is a technical thing that exists, and I just would like to know a little bit more about it. I mean, you can come to your own conclusions about it. I'd like to hear what your conclusions are. If you think it's just something that is a good faith tool that allows people just get a better sense of data and have a little bit more flexibility when they're building third-party apps based on League of Legends data, which, you know, I think is very fair. Or if you think there's something else going on, if you think it's a reflection of how MMR actually works. Would love to know what your thoughts are. I'm torn personally, but I think it's interesting and I think it's worth discussing in more detail. So hopefully you found this interesting. Otherwise, have a great day. If you liked the video, subscribe. As always, thank you so much to all of our Twitch subscribers and everybody else. Later.